Okay, in this video, I'm going to talk about Weinberg's Part 2, which are his two chapters that include one on the 1892 speech regarding Christopher Columbus Day, and then the second one, a chapter on George Washington's proclamation for Thanksgiving Day. And what I was struck by in the chapters is, first of all, that what Weinberg seems to want is to claim that thinking historically starts with questions, and it starts with simple questions. So in the case of the 1892 newspaper article, the question is, when did this thing happen? When was this speech given? Where was it published? Like, give me the facts of the case. Um, the high school students who read it launched right into the content. And what Weinberg seems to want us to get, like, before we get to the content, get into what's actually in the document. Like, what is the document? And in this case, it's a newspaper article of a speech from 1892. And I think about that in life kind of like, what is it that's before me? What is it that actually is in front of me? We all get spam mail, right? You get a letter and it says, "Oh my God, your mortgage is in jeopardy," or "Oh my God, here's a credit card that if you don't act now, you know not to call," right? 20 years ago, everyone used to get email like, "This princess from Africa needs $1,000." You know not to send $1,000. You know this is just a spam letter because you're looking at the what it is. This is a letter in the mail. It doesn't even address you by name. It's trying to get something from you. Versus if you get a bill from your electric company, you're not gonna be like, "Oh, I don't have to pay that." You're like, no, you know this is a bill from a company that you have a relationship with. So the first thing, it seems that historical thinking is kind of seems almost simplistic, but just start with what's in front of you. And I don't know if students find that boring or hard or it seems silly, but like, I try to encourage them to do that and to think about, like, you do that in the rest of your life, right? If you go out on a date with someone, you look at what's in front of you. You look at, like, oh my God, you look 10 years older than and 100 pounds larger than the photo I saw online of you. Like, you look at what's in front of you. You look at what the person is saying, what they look like. If they're looking at their phone the whole time, you're aware of that. So aware of kind of the what is right in front of you. And starting with questions from then, what is in front of me? Why is the person on the phone in front of me? Why a speech in 1892? Why a newspaper article? Why a reference to, why is it about Christopher Columbus? And that takes us to the next chapter on George Washington and his speech about Thanksgiving Day, where once we start with these kind of like, we kind of know the basics of something. Okay, this is a proclamation from 1789. He's the president. Um, we might get into then context. So first we start with the like, what is the text? And then we get context, the with the text, what's happening around it. Before we get into like the close reading, before we get into the minute like word by word by word by word analysis, what is called close reading, Weinberg wants us to actually like have a sense of the context. And I think this is where things get a little hard because, like, what context are you supposed to know? What context do you need to know about George Washington, about his times, to best understand or to best consider that proclamation? Do you need to know what's happening religiously at the time? Do you need to know what's happening politically? Do you need to know what's happening globally? And I think that's where history gets like really difficult because there's so many contexts. If you take biology, the context is, physical beings. If it's chemistry, it's chemicals. If it's psychology, the context is the psyche or emotional well-being. And so I think part of it is we just kind of don't know how to do history because it's just too big. We don't know what container we're supposed to think about whatever this text is. And I feel like in learning history in classrooms, it becomes, okay, what's the container the teacher wants me to know? just tell me. At that point, I'm just going to sit back and be like, tell me what you want me to think about this document. And rather than finding ways to explore it for oneself, to explore like, okay, what is it do I want to, okay, what other holidays were established? What did George Washington have to say about religion? Why November 26th? Granted, that is my birthday, and George Washington was probably looking forward to that because I know he's a big fan. But I think that's one of the reasons like why people turn off from history is that it gets too like there's too much. It's too big. It'd be like studying biology instead of like, oh, we're gonna do human anatomy. It's like, no, we're gonna do all anatomy everywhere. It's like, but there's too many bodies, too many like that's just like way, way, way too big. So as we move forward, what I want us to think about is how do we get people engaged with context? And how do we get engaged? How do we get people engaged to think about the basics? How do we make the basics exciting? You know, I coach sports, and oh my God, nobody wants to do the basics. No one wants to learn, like, this is just how you dribble. This is how you and dribble over and over. It almost seems like there has to be like a level of excitement with playing and then to want to do the basics. So I think this is kind of where we're getting into trouble and how do we get thinking historically to be exciting and then helpful for our lives and how we kind of go at things. So when you get into the assignments, we're going to think about how can we get into the basics and how can we get into context in a way that are actually like things we want to do rather than just, oh, the teacher is making me do it and what can I say to get his or her approval.